Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, that was me. Also, to take just a short call on this, and I know I don't want to repeat what anybody else has taken your point in regard to that, but Minister, if you can just the mitigating factors in Part 1 of this particular bill, and I'm fathomed because this is exactly what the cultural reports did for Māori in the system, and we know that Māori are overrepresented in the justice system. We know that we make up 50% of the male prison population, 67% of the female prison population. We're 5 times more likely to be sentenced, more than Pākehā, for the same crime. And so the mitigating circumstances for Māori families must be taken into consideration. And I just want to take into consideration as to why the cultural reports were declined by this particular government in this particular parliament actually absolutely fathoms me, because it did the same thing. But what it did allow was for people to be able to, well, for lawyers and for judges to make their decisions when it comes to sentencing based on those cultural reports. I see this similar, but not the same, right? But not the same. What this tells me is that mitigating circumstances for non-Māori will be a lot easier, because there's no focus on those particular things. And we know that Māori youth also have higher and more disproportionately targeted in that particular phase. And I just want to pick up on what Dr. Duncan talked about not so long ago, is that the mitigating services, the mitigating factors as to why our youth are in that particular predicament in the first place. And I look at the complex interrelated challenges that many of our rangatahi face across the youth court population. It's considerably high. There's high rates of neurodisabilities, FASD, traumatic brain injury, dyslexia, autism, spectrum disorder, exposure to family violence, dislocation from schooling, and the history of trauma. And whether these mitigating factors consider any of those things when sentencing is applied to young Māori, who will then make up the 50% of the male prison population, or the 67% of the female prison population. And so, does this bill in Part 1 ease the pain of Māori making up that particular amount in terms of the population incarcerated by the New Zealand justice system? Those are the questions I have. Does this bill ease the pain for Māori in those percentages? And does it consider what the cultural reports were there to ensure? Which I think you're trying to do here, but it actually doesn't go that far to ensure that those cultural reports, because that's the cultural part of it, right? Yes, there are mitigating factors in terms of some of the disabilities that maybe some of these kids and some of their parents and some of their adults have. But what it doesn't do is actually look at the cultural background, the intergenerational trauma, and all those types of things that a cultural report would have done. Could you answer those, please?
Well, I think it's good that Rawiri has brought up that point. You know, what will happen if suddenly things change?
Yeah, I mean, I keep going back to the regulatory impact statement, because in classic coalition style, there was limited consultation with Māori. You know, a very interesting point that the RIS brought up, the RIS, in regards to the treaty, is that in Article 2 of the treaty, it guarantees tino rangatiratanga, or decision-making rights over resources in taonga. And upholding tino rangatira should allow for Māori offenders to access culturally appropriate rehabilitation and reintegration support, and that longer prison sentences may prevent them from engaging with community-based rehabilitation services. So, again, this bill is not going to do much for Māori. If anything, it's probably going to make the situation worse for Māori, and it's probably going to push them further into gangs.
Yes. So
because there's no support for them. You know, and we've already seen this government cut funding and propose to, revoke, Section 7AA and other things that impact Māori.
Yeah. Well, let's see how he answers the questions.
Paul Goldsmith.
Just in response to the previous speaker, it is my hope that this bill will ease the pain, particularly for Maori victims of crime, who are Maori, of course, yes, are overrepresented in the prison population. They're also overrepresented amongst the victims of crime, and have a real interest in seeing that their justice is done, and that part of the justice response is real consequences for crime. Of course, the sentencing framework is only one part of the justice response, and yes, we've got real focus on rehabilitation, real focus on dealing with those drivers, and the member referred to not being at school, and so we've got a real focus on truancy to help deal with some of those drivers of crime at the same time. So absolutely, that is the desire. In terms of the cultural reports, what this government did was stop the cottage industry that had developed around the writing of those reports, but the Sentencing Act still obviously provides the opportunity for the background of the offender to be taken into account. What this bill does is put a total limit on the total discounts that can be applied. And finally, in relation to Mr. Duncan Webb's references around prosecutorial misconduct, that is excluded from the 40% cap, as it's not a personal factor.
Carl Bates.
I move that debate.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't care what Carl has to say, but yeah, basically the summary of that answer is pull yourself up by your bootstraps. This is again, like I said before, this is not going to help Māori. What's going to ease crime is prevention and rehabilitation, and we've got data that reflects that is what you should be doing.
Yeah.
Especially for
exactly.
Māori. They're just choosing to ignore the data. It's in the Reg 3 impact statement if you want to look at it.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky.